The throne room of Valdara Prime smelled like burnt ozone and regret, which frankly was appropriate considering what Princess Kaelor'ith had just decided to do. She lounged across her levitation throne, her iridescent scales catching the light of 3 suns filtering through the observation dome, and stared at the human standing before her with all the smug certainty of someone who'd never been proven wrong. "So," she drawled, her voice dripping with amusement that would have made a lesser diplomat flinch, "this is what Earth sends as their, what did you call it? Cultural ambassador." The human, a woman named Devika Okafor, according to the datapads, smiled. Just smile. Not the nervous, twitchy smile Kaelor'ith had come to expect from species meeting Valdaran royalty for the first time. No. This was the kind of smile that said, "I know something you don't." And honestly, that irritated the princess more than she cared to admit. "Ambassador is correct, Your Highness," Devika replied, her tone respectful, but not obsequious. "Though I prefer to think of myself as a bridge builder." Kaelor'ith's closest advisor, Lord Vexthar, a grizzled warrior who'd seen more combat than most civilizations had seen peace, shifted uncomfortably. He'd been against this meeting from the start, muttering something about humans being unpredictable and dangerous. But Kaelor'ith had waved him off. Humans were new to the galactic stage, barely 3 cycles since first contact. They were primitives who'd only just figured out faster-than-light travel by stumbling onto Kerrigan technology they'd salvaged from a derelict ship. Lucky little scavengers, really. "Bridge builder," Kaelor'ith repeated, letting the words hang in the air like a ad smell. "How quaint. Tell me, Ambassador Okafor, what exactly do you think you're going to build a bridge to? My people have conquered 17 star systems, subjugated 4 major civilizations, and brought order to chaos across half this spiral arm. What does Earth have that we could possibly need?" The smile never wavered. If anything, it grew slightly wider. "Perspective, Your Highness." Kaelor'ith blinked. Once, twice. Then she laughed. A genuine surprised bark of amusement that echoed through the cavernous throne room. Her entourage, a collection of military officers and court sycophants, shifted nervously. The princess didn't laugh often, and when she did, someone usually ended up regretting it. "Perspective," she repeated, still chuckling. "Oh, this is rich. You know what? I like you. You've got spine. Probably stupid spine, but spine nonetheless." She leaned forward, her eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangular pattern on her elongated face, narrowing with interest. "Let's play a game, shall we?" Devika's expression didn't change, but Vexthar groaned quietly. He knew that tone. Nothing good ever came from that tone. "I'm listening," Devika said. "Excellent." Kaelor'ith gestured, and a holographic display materialized between them. "Here's the game. I'm going to test you. Nothing physical. I'm not a barbarian, but I'm going to present you with 3 challenges: intellectual, cultural, and tactical. You succeed at all 3, and I'll personally sponsor Earth's application for full council membership. You fail even 1. She paused, grinning with far too many teeth. "Well, let's just say your bridge-building career will have a very short span." The room went silent. Full council membership was everything. It meant trade agreements, technology sharing, mutual defense pacts. It meant humanity would leap forward centuries in development. It also meant Kaelor'ith was gambling with her considerable political capital on what she clearly thought was a sure thing. Devika considered for exactly 3 seconds. "I accept." "Of course you do," Kaelor'ith purred. "You don't have a choice, really. Refuse, and you insult me. Insult me, and Earth stays in the remedial section of galactic civilization forever." She waved her hand dismissively. "But don't worry, I'm not entirely cruel. You'll have assistance. I'll assign one of my own advisors to help you prepare. Vexthar, you're up." The old warrior's scales actually paled. "Your Highness, I was just about to volunteer," Kaelor'ith finished sweetly. "Weren't you?" Vexthar closed his eyes briefly, probably praying to whatever gods warriors prayed to when their royals had clearly lost their minds, then nodded. "As you command. 3 days." That's how long Kaelor'ith gave them to prepare for the first challenge. 3 days, during which Devika was given access to the Valdaran archives, a modest suite in the palace's guest wing, and the dubious companionship of Lord Vexvar, who spent the first 6 hours of their acquaintance glaring at her like she'd personally offended his ancestors. "You realize," he finally said, on the second day, as they sat in the archive's study chamber, "that the princess is toying with you. She's bored. Your entertainment." Devika looked up from the historical text she'd been scanning, something about the first Valdaran expansion and the subjugation of the Krell Confederacy. "I know." Vaxthar's expression shifted from hostile to confused. "You know, of course. She made it pretty obvious." Devika closed the text, leaning back in her chair. Powerful, intelligent, unchallenged for probably her entire life. Everyone either fears her or worships her. So when someone new shows up, someone who doesn't automatically grovel, she gets interested. It's not personal, it's just psychology. The warrior stared at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a rough, rust sound, like machinery that hadn't been used in years. "You're either very clever or very stupid, human. Why not both?" That got another laugh. "Perhaps," Vexthar conceded. "Very well, if we're to have any chance of surviving this ridiculous gambit, I suppose I should actually help you." He pulled up a holographic interface. "The intellectual challenge will be about Valdaran history and philosophy. The princess fancies herself a scholar, though don't tell her I said that. She'll ask you to analyze a historical decision and provide an alternative strategy. The trick is, she doesn't actually want an alternative," Devika interrupted. "She wants me to justify why the decision was correct, thereby validating Valdaran's superiority." Vexthar's 3 eyes widened. "How did you?" "Like I said, psychology." Devika smiled. "But here's the thing, Lord Vexer, I'm not going to do that." The day of the first challenge arrived with all the pomp and circumstance of a state execution, which Vexar had helpfully pointed out wasn't entirely inaccurate. The throne room was packed with nobles, military brass, and various hangers-on, all eager to watch the primitive human embarrass herself. Kaelor'ith sat on her throne, looking particularly pleased with herself, which was never a good sign. "Ambassador Okafor," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. "Your first challenge, the Siege of Thanox. 12 cycles ago, the Thanoxians refused to acknowledge Valdaran's sovereignty over their system. I led the military response personally. We blockaded their homeworld, cut off all supply lines, and waited. 3 months later, they surrendered unconditionally. No shots fired, no lives lost on either side." She leaned forward. "Tell me, human, what would you have done differently?" The crowd murmured. It was a trap question. Everyone knew it. Say the princess was wrong, and you insult her. Say she was right, and you prove human strategic thinking is derivative and unimaginative. Devika stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. "Your Highness, with respect, you're asking the wrong question." The murmuring stopped. Kaelor'ith's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, the question isn't what I would have done differently," Devika continued calmly. "The question is, what happened after the surrender?" Vexthar, standing off to the side, made a noise that might have been a groan or might have been a laugh. It was hard to tell. "What happened," Kaelor'ith said, her voice dangerously soft, "is that the Nensians became productive members of the Empire. They pay their taxes, they follow our laws, they contribute to our economy. They're model citizens. Are they happy?" Silence. The kind of silence that precedes either violence or revelation. "Happy," Kaelor'ith repeated, as if the word were foreign. "Happy," Devika confirmed. "Do they wake up glad to be part of the Empire, or do they wake up resentful that they were coerced? Do their children grow up proud of being Valdaran, or do they grow up remembering the blockade? Because here's the thing about humans, Your Highness, we've run this experiment many times. Different variations, same result. You can force compliance, but you can't force loyalty. And compliance, without loyalty, is just rebellion waiting for an opportunity." The throne room erupted. Half the crowd was outraged at the audacity, the other half was too shocked to react. Kaelor'ith held up one hand and the noise cut off instantly. "You're suggesting," she said slowly, That my greatest military triumph was a mistake? No, Devika replied. I'm suggesting it was incomplete. You won the war. You didn't win the peace. She took a breath. If it were me, after the surrender, I would have sent aid, food, medical supplies, infrastructure support. I would have framed it not as charity, but as investment in our shared future. I would have offered the Noxian leadership positions in the imperial government, real positions, not token appointments. I would have made them partners, not subject. Kaelor'ith sat back, her expression unreadable. That would be seen as weakness. By whom? Devika challenged. The Noxians would see strength enough to be merciful. Your other subjects would see wisdom enough to build rather than just conquer. And your enemies? She smiled. Your enemies would see something far more frightening than military might. They'd see an empire that people join willingly. That's the kind of power you can't fight with weapons. The silence stretched. Vexthar had stopped breathing at some point and appeared to have forgotten to start again. Finally, Kaelor'ith spoke. Lord Vexthar. Why yes, Your Highness. How many rebellions have we suppressed in Thanok's space since the surrender? The warrior checked his datapad, his hands shaking slightly. 17, Your Highness. Small scale mostly. But 7. Kaelor'ith's gaze never left Devika's face. Interesting. The princess stood, her full height impressive even by Valdaran standards, and the entire court held its collective breath. Then, slowly, deliberately, she began to clap. The sound echoed through the throne room like gunshots. Well, Kaelor'ith said, still clapping, a grin spreading across her face that was equal parts impressed and terrifying. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. Possibly both. She stopped clapping, descended the throne steps, and walked right up to Devika until they were nearly nose to nose. You pass. Barely. And only because you made me think, which I hate and respect in equal measure. The court erupted again, this time in confused applause. Vexa finally remembered to breathe. The cultural challenge, Kaelor'ith announced, spinning on her heel and addressing the crowd, will take place in 3 days. Ambassador Okafor will experience a traditional Valdaran bonding ceremony. Let's see if human adaptability is as legendary as their stubbornness. As the crowd dispersed and Devika was escorted back to her quarters, Vexthar caught up with her in the corridor. That was insane, he hissed. You basically told the princess her greatest achievement was flawed. It was, Devika said simply. And somehow you're still alive. She's smarter than you give her credit for, Devika replied. Smart enough to recognize truth when she hears it, even if it stings. Vexthar shook his head, but there was something like admiration in his eyes. The next challenge won't be as easy. The bonding ceremony. It involves neural linking. You'll experience memories, emotions, thoughts that aren't your own. Valdarans train for years to handle it. You'll have 3 days. Then, we'd better get started. The bonding ceremony took place in the Hall of Convergence, a circular chamber with walls that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Kaelor'ith was already there when Devika arrived, along with 5 other Valdarans members of the royal family, Vexthar explained quietly. The princess's siblings. Torek, the eldest, a military commander with scars that told stories. Lissa, the scientist, her eyes distant and analytical. Morath, the diplomat, watching everything with careful attention. Rael, the youngest, barely into adulthood and clearly nervous. And Zerek, the quiet one, whose stillness felt more like coiled energy than calm. The rules are simple, Kaelor'ith explained, gesturing to the neural interface at the room's center, a crown-like device with 6 connection points. We link, we share. You experience what it means to be Valdaran. If your mind breaks, she shrugged. Well, at least you tried. Encouraging, Devika muttered, but she stepped forward and took her position. The neural crown activated, and reality shifted. Suddenly Devika wasn't just herself anymore. She was Torek, standing on a battlefield, watching soldiers fall under her command and carrying that weight, that crushing responsibility. She was Lissa, burning with curiosity, frustrated by the limitations of current technology, obsessed with understanding the fundamental forces of the universe. She was Moreth, navigating a negotiation where one wrong word could trigger a war, feeling the thrill and terror of that diplomatic tightrope. She was Rael, young and uncertain, desperate to prove herself worthy of her bloodline. She was Zarin, silent because words felt inadequate for the complexity of thoughts racing through her mind. And she was Kaelor'ith, brilliant, bored, lonely at the top, craving challenge, craving someone who would push back, craving meaning beyond conquest. But here's the thing. They were experiencing her too. They felt what it meant to be human, to be short-lived and burning bright because of it, to come from a world where cooperation wasn't just preferred but necessary for survival, a death world by galactic standards, where humans had clawed their way to the top of the food chain through sheer bloody-minded persistence. They felt humanity's fear of the dark and its compulsion to light torches anyway. They felt the weight of history, thousands of years of conflict, cooperation, failure, and triumph compressed into a species barely off its homeworld. The neural link intensified, and Devika gasped as memories flooded faster. Valdaran history stretched back millennia, empire after empire, conquest after conquest, until it all blurred together into one long narrative of dominance. But underneath, buried deep where even Valdarans didn't like to look, was loneliness. The isolation of being so powerful that no one could truly relate to you, the emptiness of winning every fight before it started. And then, the humans showed the Valdarans something else. Earth's history, the world wars, the near extinctions, the moments when humanity stood on the brink and somehow, impossibly, chose to step back. The space race born from competition that became cooperation, the International Space Station, nations that had been enemies working together in orbit, the Mars colonies, built by people who knew they'd never see Earth again but went anyway. The first contact protocols, designed not for dominance, but for understanding. The link shattered. Everyone stumbled back, gasping. Lissa was crying, actual tears, which Vexthar later claimed he'd never seen from her. Ral looked shaken to his core. Moreth was laughing, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. Tarek sat down heavily, staring at nothing. Exaren's eyes were wide, seeing Devika, really seeing her for the first time. Kaelor'ith stood frozen, one hand pressed to her chest. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough. "You're all crazy. Your entire species is certifiably insane." Devika, still recovering, managed a weak smile. "Yeah, we get that a lot. You live barely 100 cycles and you spend half of that fighting yourselves, and somehow you still find time to dream about the stars." Kaelor'ith shook her head. "We've had millennia of peace within our own species, and we've spent it conquering everyone else out of, what? Boredom? Not boredom," Devika corrected gently. "Fear. Fear that if you stop expanding, you'll to look inward. And looking inward is scary." The princess laughed. A real laugh this time, not the cruel amusement from before. "You pass. Obviously. And damn you for making me feel things about it." The final challenge came 2 days later. Tactical, military. Kaelor'ith's home ground. They stood in the war room, a holographic star map floating between them, showing the border regions of Valdaran's space. "Here's the scenario," the princess explained, her tone all business now. "The Crithian Collective has been making aggressive moves along our border. 3 cycles ago, they destroyed one of our patrol ships. Last cycle, they established a military base in disputed territory. Yesterday, their fleet moved into attack formation." She highlighted several points on the map. "Standard doctrine says we respond with overwhelming force. We mass our fleet here, here, and here, then jump in and obliterate their base before they can react. Clean, efficient, and it sends a message. What do you do?" Devika studied the map, her mind racing through possibilities. The old her, the her from before the neural link, would have approached this tactically, looking for military weaknesses, but she'd felt Kaelor'ith's mind now. She knew what the princess actually wanted. "I do nothing," Devika said. The room went silent. Every military officer present looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Nothing? Kaelor'ith repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Not nothing, Devika corrected. I don't attack. Instead, I send a single ship unarmed with a message. I tell the Crithians that I know they're not acting out of strength, but desperation. Their economy is collapsing. Their people are hungry. The military posturing is a distraction from domestic problems. She manipulated the hologram, pulling up economic data. See? Their agricultural sectors have failed 3 cycles in a row. They're on the brink of famine. Turek, attending as military advisor, frowned. How did you? That's classified intelligence. Lissa helped me access it, Devika said, nodding to the scientist, who looked suspiciously innocent. The point is, the Crithians don't want war. They want help and they're too proud to ask. So I offer them a deal. Stand down, open negotiations, and in exchange, we provide agricultural support and trade agreements. They save face, we gain a potential ally instead of an enemy, and nobody dies. Kaelor'ith walked around the hologram slowly, her expression unreadable. And if they refuse? If they see the offer as weakness and attack anyway? Then we fight, Devika said simply. But we fight knowing we tried peace first. That matters. Not just to us, but to every other civilization watching. Because they are watching, Your Highness. Every decision you make, every action you take, it's all being judged by potential allies and enemies. You've built an empire on fear, but fear is exhausting to maintain. Eventually something stronger always comes along. Respect, though. Loyalty earned rather than coerced. That lasts. The princess stopped walking. For a long moment, she just looked at Devika, really looked at her, the way Zarin had after the neural link. Then she turned to Turek. Send the message. Exactly as she suggested, Your Highness. That's an order, Commander. Turek saluted, his expression troubled, but he moved to comply. Kaelor'ith turned back to Devika. You know what I find most irritating about you, Ambassador Okafor. You're right, about almost everything. And I hate that. She smiled, sharp and genuine. You pass. All 3 challenges. Congratulations. The war room erupted in shocked murmurs. Vexthar looked like he might faint. But here's the thing. Kaelor'ith continued, raising her voice to cut through the noise. I'm not just sponsoring Earth's council membership. I'm proposing something better. She pulled up a new holographic display, this one showing political structures and treaties. A formal alliance, Valdara and Earth. Partners. Not master and subject. Not conqueror and conquered. Partners. You bring your insane human perspective, your adaptability, your bizarre inability to accept the impossible. We bring our technology, our resources, our experience. Together. She grinned. Together, we might actually build something worth building. Devika felt her heart racing. This was beyond anything she'd hoped for. That's, Your Highness. That insane. Yes. Unprecedented. Absolutely. Necessary? Kaelor'ith's expression turned serious. After feeling what you showed me in the neural link, after seeing how humans approach problems, after watching you turn every challenge into an opportunity for cooperation rather than domination, it's necessary. Because you were right about something else too. We've been looking outward to avoid looking inward. Maybe it's time we stopped conquering and started growing. 3 months later, the Crithians accepted the offer. The agricultural aid began flowing, trade routes opened, and the border tensions evaporated. The Galactic Council watched in shocked fascination as the Valdaran Empire, feared across known space, extended a hand instead of a fist. 6 months after that, the formal alliance between Valdara and Earth was ratified. Princess Kaelor'ith and Ambassador Devika Okafor signed the treaty in the same throne room where they'd first met, surrounded by representatives from both worlds and dozens of other civilizations who'd come to witness history. As they clasped hands, Kaelor'ith's scaled hand and Devika's smooth one, the princess leaned in and whispered, "You know, I only did this because you annoyed me into it." Devika grinned. "I know. And you only admitted that because you've started to like being challenged." "Shut up." Make me. They both laughed, and in that moment, with cameras broadcasting across the galaxy, everyone watching saw something remarkable. Not just an alliance, but a friendship. Not just political expedience, but genuine respect. Vex there, standing nearby, shook his head and muttered to Torek, "I'm too old for this kind of chaos." Torek, watching his sister actually smile, not smirk, not grin predatorily, but genuinely smile, replied, "Maybe chaos is exactly what we needed." And maybe, just maybe, they were right. The galaxy would never be quite the same. Not because humanity had conquered it, they hadn't. Not because Valdara had softened, it hadn't. Not really. But because two civilizations that should have been enemies, one old and powerful and bored, one young and scrappy and impossibly optimistic, had looked at each other and decided that partnership was more interesting than domination. That became the new galactic history. Not the wars. Not the conquests. Not the grand empires rising and falling. But the moment when someone finally said, "Let's try something different," and someone else replied, "All right, let's see where this goes." And they called it the Okafor Doctrine, which embarrassed Devika endlessly, but pleased Kaelor'ith no end. Because annoying the human had become one of her favorite hobbies. Some things, it turned out, were universal.